In an ideal world, everything would be completely fair. Good things would happen to good people. Everyone would have access to safe homes, decent healthcare, clean water, and nutritious food, and great ideas would be universally celebrated. Unfortunately, the world is very, very unideal, and life is incredibly unfair. So often, a brilliant thing will go unnoticed by the general public whose attention is fixated on the Hawk Tour girl. No, we still don't understand it either. The same is true in the games industry. What a segue! All too often, a fantastic game goes ignored for arbitrary reasons, doomed to commercial failure, while the latest copy of FIFA, or should that be EA Sports Ball Club, enjoys a ridiculous amount of success, and it's those games that we're looking at for today's list. In terms of what constitutes a flop, we're counting any game that didn't live up to its publisher's expectations when it came to sales figures. Some of these games did go on to become cult classics, and as such saw an increase in sales later on in their lives, but at the time of their release, they were all commercial disappointments. I'm Ben from TripleJump, and here are 10 amazing games that totally flopped. Number 10. Mad World. You know what I find kind of funny but also kind of sad? The fact that 2009's Mad World for the Nintendo Wii failed to set the world ablaze. Mad World takes place in Varagon City, a place which has been targeted by terrorists who have released a virus upon its population and told them that anyone who kills another will be given a vaccine before turning the whole scenario into a game show. Players take on the role of Jack Kamen, a former Marine with a chainsaw attached to his prosthetic arm who enters the games with an ulterior motive. Critics went mental for Mad World, lauding its art style, addictive hack-and-slash gameplay, and soundtrack, and whilst they lamented its short length, as we always say, if the only thing wrong with the game is the fact that there isn't more of it, is that really criticism at all? Alas, in its first month on the North American market, only 66,000 copies of Mad World were sold, and by August 2009, 5 months after the game's release, that number had only reached 123,000. According to then Sega West president Mike Hayes, the reason for this was that the mature game simply wasn't a good fit for the family-focused Wii, and that it would have probably fared better on the PS3, Xbox 360, or PC. I suppose it is a very, very mad world. There we are, there's the song. Number 9. Brutal Legend. You'd think that producing a game starring the likes of Jack Black, Tim Curry, and heavy metal legends such as Ozzy Osbourne, Lemmy, and Rob Halford would be like printing your own money, but as Double Fine Productions and EA found out in 2009, an all-star cast does not a profitable game make. Brutal Legend, which was directed by the illustrious Tim Schafer, stars Jack Black as roadie Eddie Riggs, who after being transported to a world inspired by heavy metal album covers becomes mankind's savior, battling a variety of supernatural foes using a magical flying V guitar. The game reviewed very well, but in its release month, October 2009, only around 215,000 copies of Brutal Legend were sold, and by 2011, that number had reached just over 1.4 million, which wasn't bad, but it was far from what Double Fine and EA were hoping for. Those in the know speculate that the issue was that the marketing was focused squarely on Jack Black's involvement, believe it or not, this was once a selling point for a piece of media, and the heavy metal themes, but it didn't actually tell players what to expect from the game itself. Still, the fact that it didn't enjoy more success is absolutely brutal. Number 8. Earthbound. We come now to a game that actually did quite well in its home country, but failed to capture the attention of the rest of the world when it initially launched. Earthbound centers its attention on Ness, a young baseball cap-wearing fellow, and his party of pals comprised of Paula, Jeff, and Pooh. Wait a minute. Pooh? P-O-O, Pooh! Good lord, there's no wonder no one bought this. Anyway, the game sees Ness, Paula, Jeff, and Pooh heading out on an adventure to collect melodies from 8 different sanctuaries in order to stop the alien force, Gygus, from destroying the planet. Japanese critics fell head over heels in love with Earthbound, but it didn't enjoy the same warm reception in the West. Gamers in the US simply weren't interested in RPGs in the early 90s, the graphics were deemed childish, and the marketing campaign was, well, it was weird. The reaction of US players was so poor that Earthbound didn't get a release in Europe until it was made available worldwide on the Wii U Virtual Console in 2013. In more recent times, however, Western journalists have re-evaluated Earthbound, commenting positively on its humorous yet poignant storyline, charming visuals, and delightful soundtrack. We're just glad it's finally getting the appreciation it deserves. Number 7. Psychonauts. We've got another visit from Mr. Timothy Schafer now, and yet another game of his that is absolutely brilliant but never got the financial success it deserves. Released in 2005, Psychonauts centers its attention on Ra Rasputin, who is not the lover of the Russian queen, but is instead a young boy with psychic abilities who runs away from the circus to sneak into a summer camp for people with powers like his, only to find once he's there that something sinister is afoot. The platformer was a hit with critics, who commended the art and level design, comedic writing, colorful and bizarre cast of characters, and unique dialogue options that encouraged repeat visits to different NPCs. It was also the recipient of both an E3 Game Critics Award and a BAFTA, as well as appearing on many publications' Best Games of the Year lists, but sadly, hardly anyone bought a copy. By the end of 2005, the year of its release, Psychonauts had sold fewer than 100,000 copies in North America, and by 2012, the worldwide sales were only around the 400,000 mark. The good news, though, is that when developer Double Fine acquired the publishing rights to Psychonauts, they were able to place it on more digital storefronts, and it has since been selling much better. Number 6. Shenmue. Compared to the other games in this video, Shenmue actually sold really rather well. So well, in fact, that it's one of the best-selling games of all time for Sega Dreamcast. So, what's it doing on this list? Stay tuned to find out. Shenmue tells the story of Ryu Hazuki, a young chap who sets out on a quest for vengeance against the man who murdered his father. In order to track down the killer, players must explore the open world, seek out clues, speak to NPCs so that Ryu can gather leads, and just occasionally face off against wrong-uns in Virtua Fighter-style sequences. In Japan, in its first week of release, more than 260,000 copies of Shenmue were sold, and over its lifetime, worldwide sales figures for the game climbed to over 1.2 million. Unfortunately, the game was so expensive to produce, it's estimated anywhere from between $47 to $70 million was sunk into the game, that it nowhere near made back its development costs, and as such, it's considered a massive financial failure. So expensive was its development that supposedly everyone who owned a Dreamcast would have needed to buy 2 copies of Shenmue for it to even turn a profit. We like you, Shenmue, but not enough to buy you twice, I'm afraid. Number 5. Grim Fandango. Oh, poor Tim Schafer. He just can't seem to catch a break, can he? Indeed, rounding off our Timmy trifecta of terrific titles that totally tanked, try saying that 5 times fast, is 1998's Grim Fandango, a game which, despite being considered by many to be one of the greatest of all time, was a complete financial failure and was a big part of the reason why LucasArts decided to stop developing adventure games. Yeesh. Grim Fandango puts players in the bony shoes of Manuel Manny Calavera, a travel agent at the Department of Death, who is responsible for setting deceased folks on their journey to the afterlife. Sick of ending up with deadbeat clients who have been complete jerks in life, he steals Mercedes Meche Colomar, a pure-hearted lady destined for the prestigious No. 9 luxury express train, from a co-worker. He soon finds, though, that she too has been assigned the slow route and must work out what's happened and get her where she truly belongs. Despite garnering excellent reviews and a number of accolades, Grim Fandango didn't sell well, shifting just shy of 60,000 copies in the US by the end of 1998 and reaching sales of just 500,000 by 2012. It seems gamers were just sick to death of adventure games. Manny can probably help with that. Number 4. Spec Ops: The Line. In the late 2000s and early 2010s, you could barely move for gritty wartime shooters, with the likes of the Call of Duty and Battlefield series dominating the sales charts. There's little wonder then that publisher 2K had lofty expectations for Spec Ops: The Line, released in 2012. Spec Ops: The Line focuses on protagonist Captain Martin Walker, a member of an elite military task force, as he and his men are sent into a sandstorm-ravaged Dubai on a reconnaissance mission after the 33rd Battalion, led by Colonel John Conrad, loses control of the situation, enacts martial law, and begins committing atrocities. Upon its release, Spec Ops: The Line garnered decent average review scores, with critics particularly lauding its poignant, thought-provoking story. Unfortunately, this may have ended up being the crux of its downfall, as many shooter fans simply weren't interested in feeling bad about their actions or thinking too much about the horrors of war. This, coupled with marketing challenges faced by the studio, who didn't want to spoil major plot points in any of the advertising, and multiple development delays, led to a less than stellar commercial performance for the game. Number 3. Okami. If you were to ask a seasoned gamer for an example of video games as an art form, it's likely that Okami would get a mention. Featuring artwork inspired by Sumi-e inkwash painting, the 2006 action-adventure is nothing short of one of the most visually beautiful games ever made. Okami isn't just a pretty face though. It features a wonderful story which combines Japanese mythology and folklore and tells of how the Shinto sun goddess Amaterasu, who takes the form of a white wolf, saved the land from darkness. Additionally, the celestial brush mechanic is innovative without being gimmicky, and the gameplay is highly engaging. Sadly, only around 200,000 copies of Okami had been sold in North America by the end of 2006, and only a further 66,000 copies were purchased by folks in Japan, leading director Hideki Kamiya to describe the game as a failure. In the years since its original release, however, Okami has become something of a cult classic. This led to a high-definition port being released for the PS3 in 2012, which was later also released for 8th generation consoles in 2017, and by June 2024, sales of Okami and its HD port had topped 4 million copies, meaning it's now so successful, it's getting a sequel. Aw, I do love a happy ending. Number 2. System Shock 2. When people talk about the greatest games of all time, especially the very best first-person shooters ever made, System Shock 2 is often a title that comes up. It's for this reason that it may be surprising, nay, shocking, to learn that, upon its release, it really wasn't all that popular. System Shock 2 takes place aboard the Von Braun starship, where a genetic infection has broken out and ravaged almost everyone aboard, turning them into mutants controlled by a hive mind known as the Many. Players assume the role of a survivor aboard the ship who must work with the Many's maker, Shodan, in order to destroy her creations. The game was critically acclaimed upon its launch in August 1999, garnering an average review score of 92 out of 100 and being praised for everything from its first-person shooter gameplay and atmospheric sound design to its role-playing systems and story. Despite all of this though, by April 2000, only 58,671 copies had been sold. That's very specific. This has been attributed to its graphics, which weren't as good as some of the other games at the time, its high difficulty, and the niche appeal of the psychological horror genre. As with a lot of these games, it has become something of a cult classic in the years since, and 2 decades on, is finally getting the love it deserves. Number 1. Beyond Good and Evil. Although we here at Team TripleJump know full well that Beyond Good and Evil didn't do very well in the sales stake when it first launched, it still surprises us. After all, it's a gosh darned great game, so it's almost like we're in denial that it was ever a commercial letdown. Beyond Good and Evil stars Jade, a reporter, martial artist, spy, hitwoman, and general Jane of all trades, who, after the orphanage she runs is targeted by aliens who abduct several of the children, winds up working with the resistance movement to put a stop to the intergalactic miscreants. The game went down incredibly well with reviewers of the time, who cited its graphics, storytelling, and design as reasons people should buy it. But buy it, people did not, something which was attributed to an oversaturated market of similar titles and the fact that the game wasn't part of an established IP. Thankfully, Beyond Good and Evil is yet another example of a game that has enjoyed success in the years since its release. It's so popular now, in fact, that it's allegedly getting a prequel, though it was announced in 2017 and seems less and less likely to actually see release with every year that passes. So do forgive us if we remain somewhat skeptical.